Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage Deji Ike, a poet.
Citizens of Nigeria, Rome was not built in a day.
But the citizens who built Rome were intentional about building Rome. I believe in Nigeria and the promises she holds. But to rebuild Nigeria will require a collective and deliberate effort. So from the ashes of our ruins, a phoenix may rise. However, a Yoruba proverb says, Baba mo bi a nlo, o ye ka mo bi a ti n bọ̀, which means if we do not know where we're heading to, we should at least know where we're coming from. Perhaps the knowledge of where we're coming from would help jumpstart our consciousness on the direction we should be heading. On the backdrop of that, I'll be doing a poem this evening titled, Where Are Those Days? Hoping you will find inspiration in this poem to inspire the change we long to see in our dear nation. Can I verily bury this memory? Can I ever not rule over the days of innocence? Think about it. No ways of good old days in this land. It kept disappearing with the granite pyramids of Kano. The acid rain, the withered fertile field of brotherhood in Jos also killed compassion in the neighborhood of Lagos. Rails were built to connect cities and heart of folks who lived apart, I was told. Children who had little to eat would await travelers in Kaduna with open arms and offering of tuwo masara, which they shared in elation to strangers from Owerri and Warri, weary and hungry on their journey to foreign lands they later called home. In search of where it all began, I groped in the darkness of days at hand. My foresight was crazy, so I stumbled on my father's broken heart, broken by stumbling blocks of unpaid pension and bonds inflicted by compatriots who made him queue in the sun and the peanut called pension. My father screamed at the pain grew sharper when the politicians mentioned his paid pension as an achievement of their government. So, for my hazy vision and the inadequate attention of my generation to the state of the nation, not asking the aging generation the direction to our destination, my father gave me a punishment to write an epistle on how it all began. His opening line threw me off balance. What does not belong to a man, he said, a man should not take, except a woman and marry. If not that option, then it is corruption. Life is a riddle, my son. The land bled when Ovorawen was put in shackles. Heaven wept when Saruwiwa was laid to rest. Rest was his last word. That sparked this unrest within me, that heroes of noble cause who have gone to rest may never rest in peace until this matter is laid to rest. My father fell asleep. Then I picked his brain. So one day I can pick my pen to write an epistle on how his generation fell asleep. The watchmen slept into coma. Then courage gave way to hypocrisy. Weakness mistaken for meekness. The warriors and shackles of comfort. The just are gagged with wealth. The lions shed their mane watching chameleons take over the jungle as our conscience inches towards extinction. One day, I will write an epistle on how it all began and begin the epistle with a question. How did we get here? How did we assemble this orchestra? afflicted with musical myopia. However, did we climb this height of impurity, where we overlook the fact that we goaded ourselves into this labyrinth, in which we have lost the path to utopia and found a cemetery of regret to bury the relics of our days of glory. So I ask, where are the days of glory? Where are those days nothing went to waste? We made tangible things from things of little worth, like tins of milk recycled to containers for moi moi, and the big ones we used for storing detergents. How did we arrive at this creek of emptiness, where we bleed our land for fortune, spill oil on the future, borrow the earth for wealth, bury our inspiration within? Oil may fuel cars, I know, but inspiration will fuel those who will build cars. As imitation of one generation by another will determine the exaltation of a nation or her limitation from generation to generation. And this is not a legend. Inspiration is not a legend. Like those days were real, when empty cartons were remolded into space shuttles and exotic cars that carried our children to the land of their dreams, on the shoulders of fathers who washed sweat of labor off their hands rather than blood of kindreds, and mothers who needed not stay awake at night twisting and turning figures on public ledger. Where are those days daughters were proud of fathers who were soldiers and sons aspired to be soldiers? I'm afraid generals now handle cash than guns, and I've seen colonels amass wealth better than living up to their rank on the battlefield. Where are those days our national anthem was a prayer? Each verse crafted a master key that unlocked doors in days of uncertainty. Virtue flowed in our veins, love expressed in purest ways, as bars of iron could not cage our dignity. Praise be the name of the Lord. Have mercy on your people. Just before the shepherds started to hustle flocks with fancy billboards and the scriptures shrank into apps on the same tabs where we watch porn, were the days our offering went straight from the heart to the hands of the needy, or the offering bowls on sacred altars, then carried further to orphans and widows and accounted for by church elders. But on this new road to salvation, I see end-time ministries where offerings are swiped from debit cards to POS on glamorous altars, wired to holy accounts, and further to offshore for the offspring of the shepherd. Worse still, lavished on private jets and building colleges the congregation cannot afford. Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alamin, Astaghfirullah. As I long for those days to be back when peace was not haram, but what we made with our neighbors, no matter their religion. Salat was a sure path to Al-Jannah. We would never need a sajada covered in blood, as our sons would not carry weapon after ablution, taking our daughters into captivity to be married off to sons of the gun. Heed my word or kill. We can pray on Arafat, worship on Sinai, fast for 365 days back to back, not until our arms are coated in peace, stretch forth in unity, until the eagle takes flight, the horses regain their dignity, not until our lions refuse to shed their mane, watching chameleons take over the jungle. Then the hope we can rekindle, that days to come may become days when bars of iron will cage our fear, to turn the wheel of progress into a movement led by chariots of patriots who will make a difference in their time and space. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deji. Ladies and gentlemen, to introduce this event, named in 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023 as one of 25 most powerful women in journalism in Nigeria. She is a seasoned broadcast journalist with over a decade and a half of experience under her belt. Her voice is one that stands her out as a journalist of repute, constantly digging for truth and holding public officials to account through her probing and insightful questions. She has won a number of awards for her work, including the British Council United Kingdom Alumni Awards for Professional Achievement and Outstanding Television Broadcaster Award from the Nigeria Institute of Public Relations. She is a graduate of the University of Lagos and holds a master's degree in International Relations and Development Studies from the University of East Anglia, Norwich, United Kingdom. She happily is married with 2 children. She is currently a supervising producer and presenter with Channels Television Nigeria, where she co-anchors the station's primetime daily breakfast show, Sunrise Daily. She produces and presents hard copy of Frank Interview Program. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage, Maokwe Ogun Yusuf.
Your Excellency, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, JCON, former Vice President of Nigeria, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Good evening. Thank you very much. I have a confession to make. I consulted ChatGPT on how to make this introduction memorable. It suggested I ask you all a thought-provoking question. So here's mine. How many of you know Celine Dion? Okay, that's good. If you're around my age, older, maybe slightly younger, don't be asking me what sort of question is that, because I did a poll in my office with youth corps members and they drew a blank. No, some of them did not know who Celine Dion was. Maybe until she headlined this last Olympics. Maybe that might have brought her back. But Celine Dion is one of my favorite R&B artists of all time. And the theme of her songs always centers around love and its unchanging nature, its constancy. She has many albums dedicated to this inexhaustible theme of love. But one song that particularly comes to mind for me now is Rain, Tax. It's inevitable. I don't know if you know that song. Rain, tax, after lightning the thunder. It's inevitable. Have you heard that song before? Yeah, great. Thank you, DJ. Correct, man. You get it. Aha, that's the song. And I'm very happy at the beginning, just before the VP walked in, he played a Celine Dion song. So I know this is a DJ that has his head screwed on right. Well, essentially she says that rain and taxes are 2 inevitable things. And it made me think of other things in life that are inevitable. Death, age, change. She even references change in the song, comparing it to fashion, and saying that love is not like fashion. Its essence remains the same. But even those who have loved for many years know that love evolves, although its core constancy remains. Now, while change suggests a transitory movement, it is also a constant, carrying within it the paradox of a double-edged sword. It can be wielded for good or for ill. If we do nothing, change still occurs. Like an uncultivated field, it may become overgrown with weeds. Or like a blank canvas left untouched, it may deteriorate with time. But if we choose to do something, cultivate the field, or paint on the blank canvas, change occurs too. The difference lies in the outcome. And maybe we shouldn't be too focused on outcomes, because a farmer seed might sometimes disappoint, or a painting might not project the true effort of the painter. but effort in itself must be commended. Which is why I truly commend all of us gathered here today for this book launch. We believe in change, the power of positive social change, as detailed in UDO JUDE ILO's new book. I don't know how to pronounce it yet. I'm still wondering whether this in front of it is silent, but it says it is possible. I want to believe that's the title. This book believes that however intractable a situation might seem, positive social change is not impossible. And it's not just a belief or some lazy hope. The ideas shared in the book show how this change can happen. We would have to listen to the review to get more on that. Today in our country, where we all genuinely desire a paradigm shift in every sphere of our national life, it is my hope that this book and the conversations we will have at its launch today will reignite the passion in us to be activists, or as Aisha Yusufu likes to say, active citizens. And having spent many years living that life, who better to guide us on this journey than UDO JUDE ILO, whose voice has lent itself to many a call to action, sometimes vociferously, other times behind the scenes, but never losing its impact. Your Excellency, distinguished guest, on this 14th day of October 2024, I boldly say to you that we are at the right place at the right time. Let's make it count. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Malpe Ogunisi. Having introduced the event, ladies and gentlemen, for the welcome address. This next guest has over 9 years of experience in the humanitarian development sector. She has managed social development programs using evidence-based approaches, implementing interventions at community, national and global policy levels. An active voice for social issues including adolescent reproductive health, water, sanitation and hygiene, WASH, social and behavioral change, gender-based violence, GBV, women's rights, economic governance, youth development, agricultural development, and food security. Her expertise has influenced various programs from governance to social change, significantly impacting communities and policy environments. She has a bachelor's in international relations and law, another bachelor's in international development and integration from the University of St. Joseph Macau, and an MSc in evidence-based social intervention and policy evaluation from the University of Oxford. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage Joy Ekane.
Thank you. That introduction makes me feel as though I just won a Nobel Award. But yeah, thank you very much. Yes, good evening, distinguished guest. Good evening, Your Excellencies. Thank you very much for honoring our invitation. My name is Joy Ekane. I'm the Programs Manager with Thornton Mace, and it is my honor to welcome you all this evening to a special occasion where we gather to celebrate a significant milestone in the journey of influencing change in Nigeria. As Nigerians, we have all witnessed firsthand the complexity and slow progression of change across various sectors, whether in governance, civil society, or community development. Change often feels frustratingly gradual. But amidst this slow progression, there are remarkable examples of successes that remind us of the power of persistence and collective action. I will give you a brief story that I will connect to this. A few years ago, my father fell ill, and of course you know how that takes the whole family by storm. I have 4 siblings, and all in different progressive times in our lives. Now, all of us, after the first year, the second year, decided we had to go back to our focus, our lives. It was difficult, but only one sibling stayed back. She stayed back home, she left everything that she was doing, and to ensure that our father and our mother were well. That was the sibling who would call to say things had finished. That was the sibling who will call to say power units needed to be replaced. That was the sibling basically who will call all the time. That same sibling was the one who called to say dad has passed. And in essence, what I'm trying to say is that as hard as it was for all of us to put together the strength to say by dad's side, only one took that choice and that decision. How does this connect to the conversation we're having today is that sibling in Nigeria is civil society organizations. They have and will continue to play vital roles in driving societal improvement in Nigeria. Their tireless effort to advocate for human rights, good governance, and social justice have brought about meaningful progress. Yet, as brilliant as these efforts have been, they are often met with challenges of continuously navigating the uncertainty of funds, policy restrictions, and a shrinking civic space, all while striving to uphold and uplift the most vulnerable in our society. It is in this reality that Thought and Mace Advisory was established. Thought and Mace Advisory, a policy and thought sector support firm established to ensure that governance in Nigeria, Africa, and beyond reflects the best interest of citizens and ordinary people. As we launch It Is Possible, Influencing Change in Nigeria, the first of our primer series, we are excited to see this work find its place in your shelf and in your hands. As we embark on this journey of change together, let us remember that every great change begins with a single idea, a single voice, yours and mine. So let us not only read the pages of this book, breathe them and bring them to life in your communities and at large our nation. Let us move forward with the conviction that change is not just possible, but inevitable. When we dare to imagine it and we make it work, it becomes a reality. Whether we are activists, policymakers, civil society leaders, or simply individuals who care about the future of this nation, let us keep pushing for the Nigeria we envisage. One where governance truly serves the people through collaboration and collective effort. We can see the change, and though it may be hard sometimes, it will be worth it. Let us embrace this journey together. If you haven't bought this book, I urge you to please get a copy, get multiple copies, and put it in the hands of everyone. It is my great pleasure again to welcome you all. Please make sure to enjoy this evening, and thank you for taking the evening out to spend it with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joy. Thank you. The next person to step on this stage to deliver the publisher's address. He's a 2012 Knight Journalism Fellow at Stanford University and 2009 Ford Foundation International Fellow at the City University of New York. He was a judge of the UNESCO World Press Freedom Awards, completing his 3-year tenure in 2016. He is now a member of the expert council of the Fetizov Journalism Awards, the world's biggest journalism contest in terms of cash prizes. He is also president of the Nigeria chapter of the International Press Institute, IPI. He is the editor-in-chief and chief operating officer of Nigeria's Premium Times newspaper, which he co-founded, and a multiple award-winning journalist and a member of the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Musikil Mojid.
Yeah, Your Excellency, former Vice President Yemi Oshibanjo, other guests here present, the book reviewer, panelists, Jude Ilo, the author of the book, all special guests here present, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to be before this distinguished gathering as this presentation of Jude Ilo's It Is Possible, Influencing Change in Nigeria. A very welcome and inspiring addition to the body of knowledge and tools available to intervene in the fairly complex reality that life has become across different spaces, and particularly in Nigeria at this point in time. At Premium Times Books, we feel like a ringside participant in history making, and feel both honored and privileged for being entrusted by Jude Ilo with the noble task of giving concrete form to this vital tool he has designed for dealing with the necessity demands of change making. Jude Ilo has engaged a very bold and significant subject and theme, which is one that really touches home and has informed what many of us have carried out over the past several years, and which we keep working on relentlessly, and in spite of everything that might want to make this impossible. Most of us here, I'm tempted to believe, are in the business of change, whether as agents, stakeholders, or beneficiaries, while a sizable number of us likely straddle or interface with the three levels simultaneously, either as individuals or groups. Many belong to different communities of practice with regard to making change not only possible, but equally a major reality of our personal and national lives. At Premium Times, when we started out in our journalism enterprise close to a decade and a half ago, it was in putting journalism at the service of deepening and sustaining democracy by creating a platform for accountability in governance and other forms of public or private services. This is one important level of seeking and being an agency for change. It has also been about lending our platform to give voice to other agents and agencies for change, so that their messages travel far and make the desired impact. This is a vision that has also informed our work in Premium Times Books. Not a few will disagree with the fact or thesis that we live in very peculiar times, both locally and globally, in which there are all sorts of pressures and distortions from and by the state on different aspects of our experience as citizens, from healthcare to education, nutrition, and general quality of life. No doubt, things are very difficult in Nigeria at this point, if not over the past decades, which has made many to keep thinking and acting in ways that could resolve much of these difficulties, which make the business of change very crucial and important, and one which we all need to be equipped to deal with. This is the knowledge that Jude Ilo has put before us in this book. At Premium Times Book, we are proud to be associated with Jude Ilo and the leadership of Thoughts and Myths Advisory for deeming us fit to publish this primer on their behalf. It is a manual and roadmap that is essential to all students, scholars, agents, and practitioners of change. Premium Times Book has three principal missions, which is to expand the reading public in Nigeria, to make essential books easily available to the reading public, and to bring books about Nigeria published in Europe, America, and elsewhere home to Nigeria. In this light, we have a growing catalog of highly remarkable books and titles, from Naija No Dey Carry Last by the late distinguished Professor Pius Adesami, to the Boko Haram trilogy, anchored by Professor Rauf Mustapha, from Overcoming Boko Haram to Sex and Social Disorder, Creed and Grievance. Also, the greatly insightful Quranic schools in northern Nigeria by Hannah Ochna, ground-cutting studies such as Dr. Omani Ibietun's Cyber Politics and the Sokoto Caliphate by Murray Last. There is also my home, The Letterman, inside the secret letters of former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo. And Azu Ishokine's literary gem on the media, writing for media and monetizing it, among a growing list of noteworthy titles that are about to be released. At Premium Times Book, we're on a mission to keep publishing books that continually deepen knowledge on important aspects of our lives, and which continue to serve as crucial resources for engaging with our issues and experiences. It is all about fostering the human capacity to keep making change possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mujib. Ladies and gentlemen, for the keynote address. Before his political career became very glaring, he was a professor of public law at the University of Lagos, a founding partner of the Simons Cooper, a prominent commercial law firm in Nigeria, and earned the prestigious rank of Senior Advocate of Nigeria. He served in the Justice Sector of the United Nations Mission in Somalia and was a member of the UN Secretary General's Committee on Rules on the Conduct and Discipline of Peacekeeping Forces. He was ethics advisor to the board of the AFDB, that's the African Development Bank, and served as an independent director of Citibank, Nigeria. When he did go into politics, he started out holding the position of Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice in Lagos State from 1999 to 2007, leading significant judicial reforms that would become models for other states in the Federation. He served as the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria for 2 consecutive terms from May 2015 to May 2023. Ladies and gentlemen, please jam those hands together and welcome on stage Professor Yemi Osinbajo, former Vice President of Nigeria, to deliver the keynote address.
Thank you very much again. Very distinguished guests, friends and colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Let me say that it is really a very special pleasure to be here today to be a part of the unveiling of It Is Possible, Influencing Change in Nigeria. It is possible, influencing change in Nigeria. So if you look at the copy of the book, you will find that the I am is actually crossed out in red. So it's not impossible, it is possible, influencing change in Nigeria. Now, whether that is possible or not, we'll find out as we go along. And I must thank my brother Jude and his team for the very kind invitation to be here today. Jude has always been about big ideas and constantly pushing for bold and new approaches to addressing the challenges facing Africa and, of course, facing Nigeria. So I wasn't really surprised when he discussed this project and said that we're doing a primer, please take note of the word, on how to influence change in Nigeria. Well, what is a primer? What is a primer? Now, this is the problem with smart people like Jude. They assume that everyone knows what they're talking about. But as a teacher of many years' experience, I started teaching in 1981. So if you calculate that, it has nothing to do with my age, but I started teaching in 1981. I prefer, as a teacher, to be sure that we're all on the same page. And I've learned my lessons the hard way. I remember in my early years as a law teacher, I was taking tutorials in criminal law, and one of the concepts in determining liability in criminal law is the eggshell principle. The eggshell principle, as in eggs, the eggshell principle. And I want to explain this in a bit of detail, just so that you'll understand what I'm trying to say subsequently. So the principle is to the effect that if you hit a man on the head, or a woman on the head, with a ruler, a thin stick, even if it's a thin stick, and his head breaks into two, and he dies, you cannot say, I'm not liable because his head was too weak. The law takes the position that a man is entitled to carry his eggshell head around. And even if you hit it, even if it's softly, even if you hit it very lightly, and it breaks, you are still liable. This is the eggshell principle of liability in criminal law. Now, this is how it is properly explained. But then I asked my tutorial class once what the eggshell principle was. People kept quiet for a while, so I was a bit concerned. Then subsequently about 3 or so people raised their hands. One said, the eggshell principle is, if you are careless in a market and you throw something and it breaks somebody's eggs, you are liable. That's one. Another said, legal experts have discovered that almost everybody you see has a weak head called an eggshell head. Another, and this was the closest to what the eggshell principle is, he said there's a difference between raw egg and boiled egg. But you're liable if you break the head of someone whose head is like a raw egg. So from those early years, I learned not to take anything for granted and to make sure that you explain things well. So what is a primer? A primer, I looked it up by the way, is a basic introductory text, a book or an article that tries to simplify or explain a particular subject. So this primer is a book, the one we're unveiling today, is a book which seeks to explain how to influence change in Nigeria. How, the hows and whys of influencing change in Nigeria. Now I hope when I ask you at the end of this what a primer is, you're not going to tell me it has anything to do with premium times or anything such thing, because I'm going to ask. Permit me to tell a story about some policy and practical change that I've been involved in. And I'll speak of my experience with judicial reform in Lagos State when I served as Commissioner of Justice and Attorney General in the then civilian administration in Lagos State in 1999, in the administration of Governor Bola Tinubu, as he then was, now, as you know, President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I cite this particular example because it is about 17 years old now. It went on from 1999 to 2007. So there's enough time to reflect, enough time to critique it properly and all that. There were two immediate challenges in 1999. The first was how to build a Ministry of Justice that was concerned with citizens' rights, the rule of law, and justice under a democratic constitution. This was important because we were coming out of years of military rule, where the Ministry of Justice was more like a Ministry of Law and Order and enforcing decrees which sometimes violated civil liberties and fundamental rights. The second problem was reforming our administration of justice system, which was beset at this time with very long delays and judicial corruption. We decided that we had to implement a justice sector reform, and we engaged all possible stakeholders, especially civil society. We had also developed a reform blueprint before we were sworn in. We established a new department in the Ministry of Justice called the Citizens' Rights Department. Before then, we had DPP's Office, Director of Public Prosecutions, Civil Litigations, Drafting, etc. So we introduced a new department called the Citizens' Rights Department.
we started something called the Office of the Public Defender under Citizens' Rights, offering free legal services for citizens who could not afford legal fees, a consumer protection unit, and a citizens mediation center. Now, there were several citizens mediation centers set up. Now, immediately after commissioners were sworn in, we conducted a survey of the perceptions of 200 lawyers who practiced in the high courts of Lagos State on the integrity of judges, their perception on the integrity of judges. 89% of the lawyers responded that judges in the state were, quote, notoriously corrupt. Notoriously corrupt. Yet, as of that date, and since the state was founded in 1967, no judge or even a magistrate had ever been reprimanded for corruption. Not since the inception of the state. And yet, lawyers who practiced in the state, 89% of them said judges were notoriously corrupt. So I called for a meeting of the 7 of the most senior judges under the auspices of the chief judge. The chief judge convened this meeting. At the meeting, I showed them the damning results of the survey and opened discussions on how to reverse the trend. We began with a discussion on their remuneration. They were earning at the time 67,000 naira a month. Now, 67,000 naira a month was not anything then. It was a small amount of money, but certainly not 67,000 naira today. They were earning, what was a very small amount of money. We then asked them, we asked ourselves in this discussion with the 7 judges, what their expenses were. So we took our pen and paper and we wrote it down. School fees for 3 children, 1 abroad, 2 in secondary school in Nigeria, 2 in 2 private schools. They had no medical insurance. They had no chance of building a home, even on retirement, especially for the amount of money they were earning. Now, these were men and women with the power of life and death. They could order the death of a convict or determine the lives and livelihoods of many. So it became obvious that there was no way that 67,000 naira could even scratch the surface. One of the judges, in fact at the time I think it was second most senior, tapped me on the shoulder and said, Leonard Attorney, you know this exercise that you're doing is rubbish. You pretend to pay us, we pretend to work. Another told the story of a time when his daughter was seriously ill and was taken to a well-known private hospital as an emergency case. His wife called him to join her in the hospital. As the hospital had managed to stabilize the girl, they now demanded a deposit to admit her for further treatment. So when he arrived, he was asked to pay 17,000 naira, but he couldn't afford it. And he was there pleading with them to have his daughter admitted while he went to raise the cash and return. The hospital refused. As he pleaded, a man tapped him from behind and said, "Don't worry, sir, don't worry. We will take care of the bill, don't worry." So the relieved judge thanked the angel profusely. The money was paid and his daughter was admitted. On his way to his car, his clerk, who came with him, asked him if he knew the man who paid the bill. He said, "No, I never met him before." The clerk told him that this was a particular litigant in the case before him. At the time, of course, he didn't know this, but he was relating this story to us to let us know that the person who actually paid the bill was somebody who had a case before him. So on the issue of remuneration of judges then, we then decided that we'll hire a good human resource expert company to work out what would constitute a living wage and other emoluments. We eventually agreed on a sum almost 5 times their earnings at the time. And then we included a good 4-bedroom house with service quarters in Lekki, Ikoyi, or Ikeja area, where we had land at the time, where the ministry had land at the time. And these houses were supposed to be theirs for life. So the moment you are appointed a judge, we'll give you a house in either Ikoyi, Lekki, or Ikeja for life, and you keep the house. They would also be entitled to a car, as a matter of fact, 2, and medical insurance. The next issue we considered was appointment and discipline. And we agreed that we had to have proper competency tests for judges and mandatory training before new judges resume. We also introduced the requirement that before a judge is appointed, the Lagos and Ikeja branches of the Nigerian Bar Association must give us an opinion of the character and competence of the judge. And of great importance also was the independent investigation of reports or complaints of corruption. Now I'll just explain that very quickly. When a judge is accused of corruption, there are one of 2 things you could do. You could bring it to the Judicial Service Commission, that's the State Judicial Service Commission. Now, if you do that, there's a lot of interference. You get calls from everybody. Calls from traditional rulers, from this and that. But we decided, in agreement with the judges, that we will send the complaint straight to the National Judicial Council. It will not stop at the Judicial Service Commission. We'll just send it straight. And they, of course, don't know anybody. They'll constitute a panel and then make a recommendation to us, which is exactly what we did. So we kept our word on remuneration and rigorously enforced appointments and discipline. 22 magistrates were sacked for corrupt practices, and 3 judges were also sacked before 2002. New judges under the new dispensation, about half the number of judges, we appointed 26 of them. These were all new judges. And this was about half the number of judges of the state. Many of them were young, some barely 35 years old at the time. And 2/3 of them were women. Now, at the time we were criticized for appointing very young people. In fact, there was some commentator in the newspaper who said that we have appointed miniskirt wearing eaglet judges. Fortunately, the ladies proved that they had more, that they were smarter than the miniskirts or any such thing. The average age of judges dropped from 55 to 44. We also arranged for judges during their vacation to sit with judges in the Royal Courts of Justice in London to get a sense of how a long-established and reputed court system works. We introduced the multi-door courthouse system, which provided robust alternative dispute mechanism. And we also established, as I said earlier, citizens mediation centers everywhere, where citizens resolve small claims mediated by trained mediators. And this substantially reduced the number of civil cases going before magistrates and the High Court. We fundamentally reviewed our civil procedural rules at the time to reduce the long delays in the judicial process. The Lagos State Judiciary, I think, experienced the beginnings of a transformation that went on in the following years and, to a very good extent, changed the nation's administration of justice system, especially regarding remuneration, appointment of judges, radical civil and criminal procedural reforms, and alternative dispute resolution. Many states adopted the Lagos model, especially the civil procedural rules. They also adopted the multi-door courthouse, including the Federal Capital Territory here. Several ministries of justice, including the Federal Ministry of Justice, established Citizens' Rights Department patterned along the Lagos lines. And finally, we wrote all these into a policy document, which was endorsed by all the judges at a judicial retreat that we held in Ghana, and approved by the Lagos State Executive Council. Now, what were the key elements of that change that took place? And what were the key elements that made whatever modest success we achieved possible? One was that we were clear that we wanted
to achieve a certain objective, a reform of our administration of justice system. And we had a clear understanding of what the problems were and a firm commitment to do what was needed to address the problem. Second, we adopted a blueprint. We had a blueprint. And the blueprint was way before we were sworn in. And we followed it strictly. Thirdly, we built a strong partnership across civil society, media, academia, and other relevant government institutions. We understood that we needed a multi-pronged approach to tackle the problems. Different institutions and groups had unique roles to play, and we had to ensure that we benefited from all of them. We needed others. We simply couldn't do it alone. The fourth was that we built a strong narrative around the relevance of what we were trying to do. We needed the buy-in of the judiciary itself, including the Federal Attorney General, the then Minister of Justice, Chief Justice of Nigeria, and Supreme Court Justices, and the President of the Court of Appeal. All of them, we ensured that they attended our judicial reform summits, and we held about 4 or 5 of those summits. And at those summits, all our plans and ideas were robustly debated with our other partners. We had to find common ground of collaboration, since of course it was not possible to agree on everything. And fifth, we planned around sustaining the reform and the changes that we were putting in place. Because we really thought it would be the wise thing, of course, is how will these changes endure beyond us. Finally, we were very hands-on, and I do not think that you can bring about any kind of change in Nigeria without being hands-on. Whoever is the CEO, whoever is the chief executive, must be absolutely hands-on. In this part of the world, the CEO is the CEO. Everybody else is an advisor. Everybody else is an advisor. And that is so, whether it is the president or a governor or a commissioner of minister, everybody is an advisor. We don't have a system of collective activity. If you are the CEO, you must be the CEO, because you're going to have to take all the decisions. I had meetings then with the Chief Judge of the state, as I said, the Chief Justice of Nigeria, the Federal Attorney General, regularly, because you have to get buy-in at every stage. You can't assume that everyone is happy with what you're doing. The constant consultation is important. In 2007, we conducted another survey. This was on the advice of the World Bank at the time, that we should conduct yet another survey. And we ran this survey along with their own people. And in the High Court of Lagos, the report was, the result was the same integrity test, 200 lawyers, another set of 200 lawyers. At that time, the score was 0% corruption. So the question was, what's your perception of corruption in the High Court, not the Magistrate Court, the High Court? And we had 0% now. Now, what happened? It wasn't as though the people became born again or anything like that. It was more because, first, remuneration was substantial, and there was consequence for any kind of misdemeanor. And they saw the evidence of the consequence. As I said, 22 magistrates were sacked, 3 judges were also sacked. So there's no question at all that the state had the resolve to punish any form of criminality or any form of corruption. Now, there was, you would say that there was some measure of dramatic change. Of course, when you look at it, many of our efforts failed. Many of the efforts that we tried to put in place failed. If you look at it, even 17 years on, huge challenges remain in the judiciary of Lagos State in particular, which is the one I'm talking about. Yes, there are still delays in the judicial process. We need more public defenders. We need citizens' mediation centers to actually work. And of course, we still need a greater amount of training and discipline. And we still hear of judicial corruption here and there. Perhaps another survey will help to establish where we're at. In other words, actual monitoring, over the 17-year period, especially in these past few years, we don't know whether such monitoring has taken place. But despite all that, and which is really the point that I really would wish to make, although a lot remains to be done years after we left Lagos State, but it's still evident that the administration of justice system in Lagos State is still the gold standard for state judiciaries, because at least at some point, which was in the beginning in 1999, a deliberate, serious-minded effort was made for reform. And since then, several attorneys general have built on it. Another thing I'd like to mention about what has happened with trying to sustain it is that we established a tradition of attorneys general of Lagos State meeting at least once. And I'm happy to say that we at least had 2 or 3 of those meetings with new attorneys general as they came on board, so that we're able to establish to a certain extent a collegiate approach, and we're at least able to share experiences and all that. Sadly I wasn't able to attend the very last one that they did, but there have been those kinds of meetings which obviously are very helpful in sustaining reform. So while we may never become experts, and this is just a general point, at influencing change in society, we have plenty of information and wise guidance in what works and what doesn't work. There are numerous examples and several different scenarios of change made, change that is stalled, and change that fails. Some facts that clearly emerge from all of what we know, and I speak for myself, are the following. The first is that there are no hard and fast rules to influencing change. Influencing change is contextual. There are no hard and fast rules. Second, that because change involves humans, and humans are a notoriously difficult species, change will often be complex and sometimes even ambiguous. The third is that we must learn to live with a measure of ambiguity and uncertainty. We are not sovereign, so we can't be sure always. But what appears constant about change makers and those who are interested in change anywhere is passion and a never give up spirit. History as well as experience provides us with the right lessons and insights to nuance our own peculiar circumstances. Failure in influencing change has often led to despair. And people say, oh, we tried, but see what happened. But the peculiarity of change is that failure might actually only be a building block, and it could be a crucial building block. Most changes of real significance are hardly from a one-off activity. They build on the many steps, many errors, and many successes of the past. The reality of bringing about real change is humbling, and anyone who speaks about change in a manner that is less than humble may not have really gone through any kind of rigorous process. While the role of an inspired or inspirational catalyst may be vital, the role of some kind of a change maker, a reformer, might be a vital one, it is hardly possible as a solo effort. Collaboration and synergies are key. Indeed, enduring change almost always requires an intentional or inadvertent development of an ecosystem of like minds. There has to be the creation of that ecosystem of like minds, whatever the change that you want to achieve. Understanding the role that others will play or will play is an important one, and we must be open to diverse roles and players. This is an important lesson from many successful and failed attempts at change. But perhaps the most frightening thing about change, and I think Mokwe mentioned this, is really that if we do not intentionally and positively seek to influence change, there will be change anyway. Only that the change could be disastrous. Consistently working at change, sometimes against all odds, is probably the only antidote to watching negative change unfold while we fold our arms. This primer on influencing change is an important contribution to the growing body of knowledge on investigating and implementing and managing change. I think it takes on a very huge challenge of explaining those processes in the context of Nigeria, our country, where, as the primer explains, on account of the recursive one step forward and two steps backwards, her change journey has sometimes led to despair. But by unpacking many complexities and ambiguities of the subject, the primer helps our understanding very greatly. But more importantly, it gives us hope. So let me again commend Jude for the hard work, and the team, of course, for the hard work that has gone into this primer. It is a testament to his optimistic commitment to moving our nation, of course, our region forward. And I'm equally delighted that Thoughts and Mace Advisory, the firm that he envisioned and that is responsible also for this publication, is firmly committed to providing knowledge and support to third sector institutions to ensure that we create a vibrant ecosystem for Nigeria and for Africa. This primer, as I understand it, is only the first in their primer series. And we look forward to more of these kinds of efforts. So before I say thank you very much, I'd like to ask someone, what is a primer? As I see that nobody dares to take on the challenge, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much. Respectfully, Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, former Attorney General, and Commissioner for Justice in Lagos. Thank you again, sir. Intentionality and positivity towards influencing change. We all need to get to that point. And so to help us step beyond the primer, hopefully practicing the things we learned from your keynote address, sir, please join me to welcome for another session of spoken word, Deji Ige.
Ladies and gentlemen, fellow Nigerians, Nigeria is not the problem. The problem is the mindset of humans in Nigeria, as well as our way and manner of doing things. Put a seed in the ground of Nigeria today, it will grow and bear fruit. Despite our misappropriation of oil revenue since discovery, the land has never failed to produce oil. These are testaments to the fact that great things have come out of Nigeria. Good things still happen in Nigeria, and positive change is possible in Nigeria. So, brothers and sisters, amidst the tales of woe we tell about our country, Nigerians must also learn to have the fortitude and faith to tell our tale of glory, lest we become victims of one-sided story of gloom we often tell about our country. A Yoruba proverb says, "Until the lions learn to tell their story, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter." For that purpose, as a poet, I'll be telling my side of the Nigerian story this evening, in the poem titled, "I Will Tell Our Glory." For the wisdom of elders, look not to Twitter. It is written in time, not online. And for their knowledge, read between the lines of their wrinkles. Let me tell you a story. It is written with the blood of my forefathers woven around the tongue of their mother, and it has never been told in a foreign tongue. It is a tale of invention, bravery, and conquest that rival the exploits of the gods. They say we come from the land where rivers sing a song, to the sound of horns, guns, the beat of talking drums, and the happy beat of a resilient people. I was told we are descendants of the immortals and mortals stronger than the immortals. I was told by moonlight tales of fatherland in the eloquence of mother tongue. Once upon a time, we were kings from the womb of queens. Of our outstanding humans, deities were made. Before ink met paper somewhere in the West, we cast words in iron, on parchment and scroll, tablet of stone, and the heart of those in search of greatness. We crafted masterpieces with gold, traded far and wide, designed legal tenders, made medicines from herbs and roots, as our lingual invention was a thing of wonder. And the discovery of dignity in my identity, I joined an army of patriots who have Nigeria encrypted in their DNA. So, on a needle or thread, I shall stand to defend our honor. I will make weary every adversary lest they tarry. My songs of revelation I'll sing to her in elation and in swift succession. My affection I'll profess in exaltation. Our fences are meant to the end, and from my end this land of honor I will tend. These are my words, words unscripted, thought unguided. My creed to her. In rain or pain, every letter I will remember. In gag or chain, every syllable I will mumble. What binds me to her is stronger than nothing. Not the name we still can't comprehend. Not the anthem we have failed to memorize. Neither the pledge we have turned to lullaby. Nor the flag we have refused to honor. What binds me to her is stronger than bond. Not the oil that blinds our sight. Not the bridge across Niger, promised to mend our fences, neither the pieces of land around Niger, nor the vision of the colonial entities that blessed our union, or the intention of the madam that names the country, Niger area. Rather, what binds me to her is in my veins and marrow, the blood we shed for our freedom on this land that has refused to be shared. It's in the texture of my skin and the fabric on it. Call it black, say it white. What binds me to her is a puzzle in the fine stripes of hanging. Call it price, name it price. What binds me to her is my pride and the majesty of her showking, the prominence of his shadow and the dignity in their stitches. It's in the east and the west, and the north and the south, and the middle of our belt. It's in the sound of their music and the beat of my heart. The eloquence of Gongo hail the talking drum. The audacity of Agogo. Yes, what binds me to her is in the rhythm of Ekwe and the rhymes of Kakaki. It's in the slow wind of Swangi and the delicacy of Genge. It's in the women and their virtue, their grace and their curves, the beauty of their names and the magnificence of their essence. Amina led battles from South Kingdom. Moremi taught military tactics in Ile-Ife. Idia, Iyesige treaded the path on which men faltered. Benin Kingdom was the place Yoba made a mark. About women waged a war against tyranny and oppression. Fumilayo Kuti drove a car before men could start the engine. It's in a man of valor. Baba Bori Enigwaje. Baba Bori Akoni Nile wa Fida Lale Gara. Akimi, Akiko, Akiba Nija. Jaja would not be ruled. Opopo was his throne. Ovoro did not succumb to the whiteness of his skin. The same things fall apart, yet Achebe walked this path. Sarowiwa defined courage, and the man died for a cause. Shoyinka raised the bar, shining across the world, the glory of Nigeria, that if you will bear, you must set forth at dawn. Tell your tale of woe, that is your story, but to the face of the world, I will tell her glory. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. For the book review. He is a Nigerian public policy expert, politician, entrepreneur, director at Human Capital Africa and co-chair #Fix Politics Initiative Nigeria. He is a founding member of the School of Policy, Politics and Governance, SPPG, and a senior visiting fellow at the Lagos Business School. He is highly regarded as an ethical, exemplary, and proven leader with over 2 decades of demonstrated success in policy design, strategic planning, and implementing development reform agendas in the public, private, and civic sectors. In 2023, he pursued his abiding interest in public service as Enugu State's gubernatorial flag bearer for the All Progressives Grand Alliance for the 2023 elections. He is a chairman and founder of Kuni Foundation, a social action organization that drives advocacy and convenes action to improve the lives of children and mothers in urban slums and rural communities. Ladies and gentlemen, please jam those hands together as we welcome on stage for the book review, Mr. Frank Nweke Jr.
But Mr. Vice President, I'd like to thank you so much for the very profound keynote you provided. You know, we were gossiping where we were sitting, just listening to you about what could have been, what is possible, just the kind of opportunities that we have in Nigeria. And your narration and narratives just underscored, really, in concrete terms, what can happen when we have the right people at the helm of affairs, in positions of authority, who have the vision, who have the intellect, who have the capacity, who have the competence, who have the personal discipline and commitment to service. But as the book review I'm about to undertake will show, it is still possible. So thank you for your service to our people. So when Jude first contacted me, I said, what's trouble with this man carry come meet me for here now? But he's my brother, my friend, and someone that I respect very greatly. And when I then started to read the book, I said, wow. I felt greatly honored that he actually invited me to undertake the review of this book. And after reading it, I was thinking of an appropriate theme, given the level of optimism that he espoused in that book. And I came up with the theme, an agency of hope, because that's really what it is to me. And so in the next 2 to 3 hours, I believe that I would done justice to it. Thank you. So, reviewing the primer, it is possible. Influencing change in Nigeria is an honor. And again, I thank Jude for inviting me. I'm really, really delighted to be here and listening to the array of speakers who have gone before me and the profound insights that they brought to bear on their perspectives on the book. I feel even doubly honored. So hope, not as a mere optimism or a euphoric feeling from momentary pleasures, but a responsibility. And as Archbishop Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama described it in the Book of Joy, hope is the antidote to despair. Yet, hope requires faith, even if that faith is in nothing more than human nature or the very persistence of life to find a new way. Hope. This primer, rightly called, or rightly so called, has come at a critical time in our country when patriots need to find a new way. It is, in my view, a rekindling of passion when despondency threatens to smother hope and the will to continue pursuing a new lease of life for Nigerians. From the front matter, which included the author's stirring dedication and acknowledgements to the Vice President, Professor Yemi Oshibajo's foreword, and Dr. Chichi Anyagolu's prologue, I was already convinced that this book had the finger on the pulse of change makers across Nigeria. Jude has brilliantly documented a framework for change, drawn from his wealth of experience, historical examples, and the undying, never-give-up spirit that is the mark, the true hallmark of change makers. And as Professor Oshibajo and Dr. Anyagolu noted, there are no hard and fast rules to influence change. The quest for change is often complex, ambiguous, and has no single pathway. Hence, we must be prepared to live with a certain measure of ambiguity and uncertainty. However, change is usually born out of incremental efforts connected through years of consistency. It is always advantageous to have a compendium of lessons from successful and unsuccessful change movements that form a structural framework for modern practitioners to build on. Change, like hope, is also nurtured by relationships, by community, whether that community is a literal one or one fashioned from the long memory of human striving, whose membership includes Gandhi, King, Mandela, and countless others. And this is a quote from the Book of Joy by Archbishop Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama. I must also acknowledge and thank Ford Foundation, Office for West Africa led by Chichi Anyagolu, for their unrelenting support for civil society and other non-profit organizations working to initiate or catalyze change in Nigeria. Specifically, the decision to system and provide answers to the question of how change happens, in my view, is a genius move. As the quote often attributed to Peter Drucker states, you can't improve what you don't measure. This primer demands that we give attention to the value of history to optimize the unique advantages of modern perspectives, innovations, and actions. Our author opens with an introduction that made me think he has been a fly on the wall during some of my conversations with my friends and colleagues. He raised the pertinent issue of a seeming over-reliance on activists, change makers, and the development sector to stand as an alternative for improving lives while the quality of governance continues to decline. Therefore, this third sector continues to face allegations of self-service. However, it is not the duty of the development sector to provide infrastructure, social amenities, and economic opportunities. Ideally, the sector should function as a bridge of sorts, engaging the government to perform its duty to citizens and helping citizens to articulate and advocate for their needs from the government. Unfortunately, the governance system seems to be wired to frustrate and undermine attempts at fundamental change. The question then is, how can change happen? Jude's approach in this primer is to highlight some evidence of change and strategies that inform them, both in Nigeria and other parts of the world. He also compares these to movements that fell short of their potential and how to avoid the pitfalls common to change makers. In 5 sections that cover the fundamental nuances of change, the place of leadership in driving change, how not to carry out advocacy, and poignant lessons to keep in mind, this primer is an easy read, loaded in my view with nuggets of wisdom. He also includes 4 well-crafted case studies that many will find helpful for their lessons and intrigues. But first, I'll speak about the fundamental nuances about change. And so before delving into these do's and don'ts of influencing change, the author was kind enough to help us understand some complementary and sometimes overlapping nuances of change, as he did in part B of this book. This fundamental understanding is important in a country where change is arduous, very arduous. We listened to Professor Shibaji a moment ago. Painstaking and sometimes outrightly perilous. They provide a lifeline for change makers when the disappointment of failure may tempt them to give up on their efforts. He wants us to understand that change can be incremental improvement, sometimes in unrecognized motions. As I pointed out from the articulately written foreword and prologue, change happens over time through consistent efforts, building on past successes, failures, and challenges. One person may initiate change, but its acceptance by many catalyzes it to succeed. Movements that have been successful across the world were layered on existing formal and informal structures of resistance and advocacy of varying kinds. The civil rights movement for racial justice in the United States of America, for instance, has taken on several expressions through the years, but not many people recall that the momentum was triggered by the action of one Emmett Till, a grieving mother who refused to cover up the atrocity committed against her son by a mob of white men. The movement took a life of its own, and from then on, simple acts of making a difference add up to create movements that take on a life of their own. The mass acceptance of an idea or a cause drives consistency and ensures the staying power of the collective through changing times and seasons. Jude went on to note that social change happens in pockets of places addressing local issues. Our national advocacy will be hollow if it is not rooted in local initiatives. You can imagine for a moment if Professor Shibaja, as Attorney General of Lagos State, wanted to reform the entire judiciary from where he was. But by starting locally in Lagos, he proved that this could be done, that this was possible. And that is the lesson that we are trying to make here. That's the point I'm trying to make here. Our work must improve the lives of ordinary citizens, underserved communities, and the most vulnerable in society for it to be meaningful and indeed sustainable. Every act of development must have a local bearing. It is like a tree that must have its roots grounded to survive the changes of weather and other factors of nature. This also speaks to the change makers' need to be deliberate and to focus on how their actions impact the larger society and to create a shift for the better. How will your effort add to the existing body of work of the long-term goals? So while channeling resources to the local context, focusing on the big picture forces strong attention to the optimal utilization of and maximizing your impact. Every well thought out effort to change something, no matter how little, adds to the greater goal of changing the whole society. So, there is a need ladies and gentlemen, to recognize little successes, learn from them, and build on them. We stand, as they often say, on the shoulders of those who go before us, or who have gone before us. Finally, in the section about the fundamentals of change, Jude speaks on the importance of controlling the narrative. Readers will understand this better as we progress to the next section. But it is critical to note that framing narratives in a way that is emotive, compelling, rational, and non-threatening to the duty bearers, be they policymakers or other relevant stakeholders, helps people's perception of the issue and gain the moral and logical high ground to influence change. Jude went on to remind us that change requires leadership. And so one of my most used quotes is John Maxwell's "Everything rises and falls on leadership." While many factors will be relevant in any change-making endeavor, the quality of leadership will determine its success or sustenance. Jude, in my view, did a wonderful job of presenting examples of leaders, or the absence of same, to help us understand the role of leadership and provide useful approaches to becoming effective change agents. I will highlight a few of these from part C of It Is Possible, Influencing Change. From the courage and wisdom of Nelson Mandela to the persuasive powers of the leading men of the civil rights movement in Birmingham, Alabama, our author underlines the willingness of leaders to take risks of varying degrees, including building coalitions of unlikely partners. So, leaders must therefore recognize the need to sacrifice personal interests, their egos, and sometimes even accepted norms to serve the ultimate goals. Those you lead may not necessarily agree with, but it is up to the leader to take that risk and be willing to manage the consequences in the event of failure. Leaders also need to have the capacity to talk to the enemy. I found this interesting. You must have the capacity to speak to the enemy. Because as Nelson Mandela said, and I quote, "If you want to make peace with your enemy, you have to work with your enemy." And that was exactly what he did in order for apartheid South Africa to become free. It is only when that happens that your enemy then becomes partner. We cannot reform institutions without working with them. So when you say, leave politics, it is too dirty. Who's going to wash it clean? Who's going to bring the detergent? Who's going to bring the water? Who's going to bring the capacity? Who's going to bring the commitment? And so it is really important, this point he made. Jude highlights the absence of a leader, and consequently, the absence of anyone to take critical risks like negotiating with the government as one of the major challenges that actually faced the NSAS protests in Nigeria in 2020. And if you ask me, more recently, in Kenya. His case study of the short-lived but inspiring moment in Nigeria's history is a succinct summary that captures lessons that our young people can take into their current demands for better governance. I was quite pleased to read chapter 12, where Jude espoused the need for a leader to build a brand. Impact leaders must be distinguishable from the pack. And so, people should easily know what you represent, what you believe, and what your mission is. And he cites the example of the indomitable Chief Gani Fahimi of blessed memory. He was brilliant. He was a man who built a dependable and relatable brand for his integrity, his wealth of knowledge, and unwavering commitment to the common man, to the protection of their rights, to a judiciary that worked and that respected the rights of citizens. Jude also used the examples of Winston Churchill, Barack Obama, and to highlight the ability to create a broad ownership of your vision and ideas. You have to believe in your idea and be able to project that conviction to others. This is very critical. And so clarity of vision, depth of passion, and communicating a relatable message is valuable in selling your vision. It is only when others buy into your vision that it can endure. It can become realizable and indeed sustainable. This was also an attribute that Jude praised in his tribute to Innocent Chukwuma. It was a glowing representation of a man who understood that the cause for change was bigger than one person. Innocent was a template for how leaders must be more focused on getting results than getting accolades. Another quality of a leader that stood out to me is the ability to take the street to the hallways of power. It is a short and powerful treatise on the power of communications, which is something of particular interest to me. Winning change requires the unique ability to translate sentiments and messages on the streets into advocacy and the language of policy understood by duty bearers. The goal is not to demonize the responsible parties, but to do what? Instigate actions in favor of your cause. Language and approach should therefore be clear, unambiguous, invitational, and engaging, giving opportunity for negotiations. In all, Jude suggests to us that leaders and change makers must walk the talk. People can hear your words, he said, but your actions speak to their hearts. And so, effective change makers must live the values that they espouse and be seen to embody the principles that underpin their work. Integrity, transparency, and accountability are needed to earn trust, command the goodwill of people, and rally them to a collective cause. I will now proceed to the subject of how not to carry on advocacy. And so in this section, Part D, Jude ILO gives a few pointers on attitudes, actions, and missteps to avoid as change makers. In summary, he emphasizes respect for oneself, for the partners that they work with, and for the cause that they drive. Actions such as lying, representation of facts, breaching the confidence of your advocacy targets, offering inducements in cash and kind, or overpromising can undermine one's credibility and advocacy efforts. Also critical and often quite challenging to avoid, as we have seen in Nigeria, attitude of demonizing advocacy targets and the duty bearers expected to implement the changes being championed. This is very critical, and I have deliberately emphasized this like 2-3 times already because of this attitude to say, okay, they don't know what they are doing. Okay, since you know what ought to be done, what do you want to do about it? And it's a common mindset that we see. And so, it is strategically ineffectual to demonize the people that you want to work with or influence or to make changes, Criticism can be constructive to influence your target audience, but harsh and antagonistic language can alienate those whose conduct you actually seek to influence. I also liked how he highlighted that leaders must take the focus off themselves. Focus on oneself, he suggested, quickly undermines credibility, and for all intents and purposes, puts the movement at risk of betrayal and utter failure. It also increases the risks of unhealthy competition with other advocacy groups. Tough battles and unhealthy competition can create a perception of unseriousness, self-aggrandizement, and confusion in the minds of policy targets. Jude went on to note that leaders must make the intended outcomes their focus, not their desire to take center stage. He went further to again suggest lessons that change must always keep in mind. And he gives us some lessons to keep in mind in this respect. Again, to show how important this is, he says that change makers should not make themselves the issue. To sustain change, leaders must ensure a multi-stakeholder buy-in and ownership of the cause. He used Barack Obama's quote, "Africa needs strong institutions, not strong men." Jude explains that individuals can lead change efforts, but systems ensure sustainability. The system can draw from an inspirational figure, but this should empower those within it to perform their functions, not restrict them to idolizing the initiator. So from the start, there should be clear frameworks of accountability to guide everyone. Change makers should also be excited to share skills and information. Skills transfer, knowledge creation, and mentorship are very important steps to sustaining pressure and protecting the progress made. It is a great way, he suggested, to hold the fort and guard the changes to avoid a reversal. Whatever has been achieved must be maintained. And you see that in the narrative that Mr. Vice President shared with us, says that even now, attorneys, current attorney generals or serving attorney generals in Lagos State, and the former ones still meet because they feel that sense of collectivism, they feel that sense of commitment to a collective, to the collective progress of the state. Relational dynamics are also vital for initiating and sustaining change. There must be, Jude ILO said, intergenerational investment. And I particularly love the quote he used from the Glory soundtrack in the movie Selma. You know, he said it takes the wisdom of the elders and the energy of the youth to win a war. Experience is not better than strength. They must work hand in hand. And this is a vital lesson for the current generation and even for those gone before them. Change also requires collaboration within and outside one sector. And so leaders must service and sustain diverse relationships. Most importantly, change makers must know when to recharge. You're not Superman, or you're not Superwoman. Even Superman has his moments. Your body and mental strength are your greatest assets. So let's keep them healthy, or let's keep ourselves healthy. And finally, no matter how daunting the challenges are, we cannot afford to stop trying. That's the centrality of the message in this review. My conclusion. So, in addition to a well-laid framework supported by evidence of events through history, Jude ILO's primer also left me with a yearning desire to find answers to questions that he noted were out of the scope of this book. For example, he asks the question that I have mused about, particularly in the past 2 years. Is holding the line enough? Is holding the line enough? This is an important question because the situation in Nigeria raises the fear that the framework outlined in this primer may be too ideal, in my view, or too simple for the complexities that we have to deal with. Yet, I am comforted by how he notes that good change makers are those who know when to pause, when to review strategies, and adapt to the dynamic nature of social, political, and economic realities. This primer is thus an important work that lights up a plethora of options for change makers. And so, in the words of Professor Shivaja, in the foreword, I quote, he said, "Perhaps the most frightening thing about change is really that if we do not intentionally and positively influence it, there will be change anyway. Only that the change could be disastrous. Consistently working at change against all odds is probably the antidote, the only antidote to watching negative change unfold. If at first we don't succeed, we have to try again and again. The danger of doing otherwise and succumbing to the risk of despondency and resignation far outweigh the responsibility of hope that we must bear. This primer answered some of the pertinent questions I have nursed about influencing change, about civil society, and the development sector. It also reaffirmed my beliefs about our responsibility for change and strengthened my conviction to keep trying. And so, as I close out my review, I'd like to share the story of two frogs that fell into a very deep pit. And so once upon a time, two frogs, one known as Olilaya. At the end of the story, I would translate for those who may not understand what that name means. The name of the second frog is Oso, sharp, sharp. Both frogs fell into this pit, and all the other frogs gathered around the pit to see how they would help themselves escape. And seeing how deep the pit was, the frogs that were gathered around this pit could not contemplate, they could not imagine, they could not see how these two frogs would survive. And they counseled, please, this pit is very deep. There's no amount of effort you make that will help you jump out. Please say your last prayers and die. And they kept trying and trying and trying and trying. After some time, also succumbed to the counsel of the king frogs, of the king frogs, and just said his last prayer and died. It remained Olilaya. Olilaya kept trying and trying and trying. He kept trying and trying and trying. Eventually, he found the momentum and actually jumped out of the pit. Other frogs said to him, my goodness, how did you do this? Could you have done it? It turned out that this Olilaya of a frog was deaf and dumb. And he told them, he's picking his hand. He actually thought they were encouraging him to jump out. They were encouraging him to try harder. That was his interpretation of all the gestures they were making. Mr. Vice President, very distinguished ladies and gentlemen, my point is, and this is really what Jude ILO is saying in his book somewhat, we must choose to be deaf and dumb to the cries of impossibility and believe that the realization of a state, country, and world that works is indeed possible. And as Archbishop Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama shared in the Book of Joy, I recommend this book. I quote, Despair can come from deep grief. Despair can come from deep grief. But it can also be a defense against the risks of bitter disappointment and shattering heartbreak. So resignation and cynicism are easier, more self-soothing postures that do not require raw vulnerability and the tragic risk of hope. To choose hope is to step firmly forward into the howling wind, bearing one's chest to the elements, knowing that in time the storm will pass. End of quote. And so I've attempted to condense 127 pages of very brilliant exposition and guidelines into about 6 pages. And so I encourage and urge and charge every change maker to study and have this primer as a reference in their collections, in their library, and in their journey of creating impact. I very, very highly recommend it. Mr. Vice President, very distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I'm deeply grateful for your time and for your attention. And Jude, for the opportunity to do this. Thank you very much, Mr. Frank Jr. Thank you for that incisive review of this book.
Time for the panel discussion. Margaret Ogun Yusuf, please.
Let's get to this conversation. Intergenerational dialogue. And I think it's quite interesting. When Mr. Ilo told me about this particular part of the event, I kept on telling him, I said, look, if you have Gen Z there, you must have people in my own age group and people who are maybe older and much older. He already had those people, but guess what? My own age group was not represented, and I protested vehemently. Unless, of course, somebody wants to. Anyways, the fact that I'm here, I guess that we are represented. So let's start with this issue of change, as to whether different generations see it differently. For your own generation, I'll start with you, Ambassador. How would you say that your generation has conceptualized the theme of change over the years?
Thank you very much, Obe, and Mr. Vice President, who's the author. I want to start by saying that I don't know if there's a generational problem in Nigeria, as much as I think that there is a culture problem. And that culture permeates all levels, and I have been very lucky to mix with the various strata of our society. So, as a young person, under 40, about 32, 33, I was close to President Obasanjo and became Corps-Marshal. Now, at 45, after being minister, I was back to Base University with 19-year-olds, 17-year-olds, and 18-year-olds. And how I realized that I was getting old. We have this joke in the policing world that when you start complaining that policemen are looking younger, it is you that is getting older, because they're still coming to police at 26. It's just that you're now getting older. So when you say, why are these small boys who are policing? You're the problem. But this girl in my class, it was an administrative law class, and they mentioned the case of Abiola and the Supreme Court justices. And the girl turned to me and said, who is Abiola? And I said, oh. I said, when were you born? She said, 1999. Wow. I said, okay. Abiola died about 6 years before you were born. So I've had the opportunity. Up till today, I came from Buhari. I'm in the law school now, the final leg of it. And I look at the young people there, and I do not see any substantial difference with what I see, whether in the villa, in the ministry, at the road safety, or on the road and in the school. I haven't seen anything that markedly shows a generational difference. I see a shared commitment to disobeying the rules. I see a shared appreciation of lack of consideration for the other person. I see every effort for everybody to get an advantage against the other. I see a society that does not keep to rules. So when I saw this intergenerational conversation, I said, well, I will reframe it to the Nigerian conversation. Because those who were born in independence in 1960, They just retired in 2020 from the public service. They turned 60. So those of them that were born in, who went to school in the 60s, saw the best of Nigeria in the 70s, when our universities were placed for sightseeing, when my friend Hakim Belosake talks about coming from Oxford and staying in the hostels in Ibadan, and then going to Ahmadu Bello to see his friends and staying in the hostel with them, they saw the best of Nigeria. What then did they deliver when they became directors, permanent secretaries, chief executives, DGs? They delivered schools that cannot accommodate their children. They delivered hospitals that their children cannot go to. So I see that we need to talk about, and today I raised it when Acemoglu won the Nobel Prize today with Darren Acemoglu and Johnson. They were announced, the three of them won the Nobel Prize for Economics. And what they are very famous for is their book about how institutions, how societies cohere by the fact that it is the society being active that constrains the power of the state and creates that narrow corridor where the state and society meet. And that is what the book that we are talking about today tries to talk about, the possibility of moving Nigeria forward. But that possibility is not a function of that leader. It is not a function of that group, that generation. It is a function of a society tired and angry with where they found themselves and coming together to exact order and to restore power to people, to its citizens. So I think that, in my own view, we are all aligned in our generational desire to get an advantage in Nigeria.
I kind of think that Angela might disagree though, because I mean, I know a bit, just a little bit about Angela, and I know that you've worked in a space where you've seen people who are selfless, people who desire positive change and are willing to give something for it, including their blood. And when I mean blood so that other people can survive, not like on the war fields. So I don't know if you have a different idea around change.
Again, I think I should also start off by saying thank you so much. This has been an interesting conversation so far, and I'm so honored to be a part of it. That being said, I think that if you look at the way we view change, I think across the generational divides, I beg to differ slightly. The way we articulate change might be the difference, maybe not necessarily the outcomes we're looking for. Because, and then again, but if you really look at it, it's probably not new. In one sense, you can say that maybe the younger generation, and let me put an age range around it, maybe from 25 and below, which I am above. But maybe from 25 and above, there's a sense of urgency. Because it's also your coming of age years. It's the time that you're becoming a full adult. Forget the fact that you're past 18. This is when you become your own person. So there's that sense of it's dawning on you that is this the country, so to speak, that we have inherited. So there's that sense of urgency. And I don't think it's very different from 40, 50, 60 years ago, where you also had a lot of CSOs born from that agitation that you had from the change makers of that time, being around the same age range as well, and saying, no, this status quo that we want to accept. So I think it's just history in its one way or the other repeating itself, but there's that sense of urgency. So perhaps it's interpreted by older people as, oh, you guys have not seen life yet, just calm down a bit. But then it's really just history repeating itself. And then, of course, you now have to think about the fact that we have a slightly different social-cultural landscape because we're all digital nomads in one way or the other. So that in itself has an effect on the way people communicate, the way people interact with the society. So because you didn't have that before, it has a way of influencing the way we engage with the issues that we see. So I wouldn't say the outcomes are different. It's just the sense of urgency that is like, and maybe older people have also become jaded. I think I'm also getting to that point where I am also becoming jaded, but yeah.
Isn't that too soon?
No, maybe it's also a function, a hazard of the job.
Okay, yeah, well, you can argue that because I remember I had the privilege, I was a student of English language, so I did Chinua Achebe's work for my dissertation, for my BA dissertation, and I know that looking through his works, you can see how he's just metamorphosed. And the last offering which he made, There Was a Country, you could see just how, disappointed he felt. The disappointment he felt in Nigeria came through. It's interesting we're having this conversation in October. It's the month where we celebrate Nigeria's independence. And just before October 1, one of the things my husband made me do, because of course, everyone knows how the economy is. We all know how we feel. We know that prices are going up on a daily basis. But one of the things my husband made me do in recent times was to say he wanted to do a recording. And he asked me to think of 3 instances where I have been proud of this country. I was very angry when he asked me to do it. I was not in the mood. I was not in the mental space. But I decided to engage in the exercise. And I said, give me time. I'm sure it will come. And I came up with more than 5. 5 instances where I would say I was truly proud to be Nigerian. I looked through Mr. Ilo's book. The case studies he gave were very poignant. I do not know if, apart from these case studies, there have been other instances where you have said, indeed, making the effort for change works.
Oh yes, I'm the wrong person to ask that because I'm very, very hopeful about Nigeria. And I've seen Nigerians across ethnic groups, across the divides, go above, beyond self for Nigeria. And that is because I started out very early in the public sector and my other experiences. And what that means is that, yes, there are many moments when we feel really proud, Nigerians. Our flag flies and we're thinking, is this the banner we want to hand over without stain? And we're thinking, though tribes and tongues may differ, in brotherhood we stand. But there is something culturally problematic about the way we are. So the examples he gave of the NSAS movement and compared with the Senegal M23 tells you something. We have this natural tendency for lack of thinking through and pursuing an idea to a logical conclusion. So we just hop on onto something, make noise about it, and expect that change will happen from it. No, it doesn't. I agree with the book that change comes from slow, painstaking effort. But that means that it is persistent effort towards the right direction. And I'll give you an instance. 2015, INEC made progress, bought card readers, and we had an election that many considered free and fair, and the incumbent president lost. 2019, the whole world that came said, the election of 2019 is less than what we saw in 2015. Well, everybody said, well, it's okay, it's politics. Then 2023 came, and the BVAS was not working. We couldn't see the results being uploaded. The IRF was an issue. And then everybody then goes, you see these things, okay. Then we went with INEC to the off-cycle elections, which are normally always very good. So we did Ondo, Ekiti, and we did Bayelsa, Kogi, and Imo. So my center comes out and says, these are false results. These results don't come from what we saw. This is what you have on your BVAS. This is what you have on the IRF. In Imo State, the governor added almost 300,000 votes to the result. Where did he do it? I said he did it in Oru East, Oru West. He did it in Oguta. Look at what the BVAS says. Look at what the results say. In the case of Kogi, I said 3 local governments, Okehi, Okene and Adavi, where the governor comes from, added the 45% of the votes that declared him winner. He didn't win the election. Based on INEC's own data, this is not, I didn't manufacture it, I didn't go to anywhere, I didn't borrow from the parties. I took INEC's data, publicly available. Okay. Now we go on to Edo State. INEC decides not to broadcast the Beavers report as the election is going on. Because normally, as the results have been uploaded, you are seeing the Beavers report. And I'm listening. Nobody in Nigeria is asking the question, okay, we can't take one step forward, two steps back. And you know why? INEC officers don't want elections to be clean. Because if it is clean, then there will be no budget for INEC. What is happening now is that everybody running an election has a budget for INEC. So you give them 1 billion or 2 billion as the case may be, they will tell you, we will alter the thing so that it will work for you. So they are not interested. It's an extractive institution, as Asemoglu pointed out. So they have no interest in the change. The only way they can change is by society's pushback. Now, we publish the names of the people who changed the results in the polling units. It's on our Tena Center site, where we're going to still do the one for Edo. We said, there's no word INEC. It is Mercy Chukuma in polling unit 4. There was 200 votes here, and he added 700. So we listed their names one by one. Guess what they did in Edo? They said, we hear they are publishing names, so we don't want to sign. So they will send the results without their names. And INEC is now hiding their names from public view. So there are simple tweaks that makes for concerted effort. Societies don't change by riot. Societies don't change by just saying revolution. Societies change by consistent effort in that direction. And that is what is missing in Nigeria. Whether the young people, whether the old people, it is something that nobody respects. At the law school, I asked the office manager, we're 1,600 and we take classes in the same hall. Yeah. There is one door, enter, and there are 2 other doors. And you lock those doors with 1,600 people here. Where is the fire service in Buhari or Ahmad? Who determines how many people can stay in a hall and how many doors you need to have for exit? And for heaven's sake, why would you not open the doors? So one day I stood there and said, we're not going to have a class until you open these doors. Because I feel like if there's a stampede in this class, you will announce, 400 people died in the stampede. Yes, and nobody will say anything. Eventually, he opened the door, and the doors now remain open. And that is just because I asked, why do we have a society where people don't want to do the painstaking job of getting simple things consistently delivered? So that is my problem why I don't think it's an intergenerational. Because you see the EndSARS finished. They were quarreling about the money. They were quarreling who received what money and not. They couldn't negotiate anything out of EndSARS to a single point agenda of a policy change. At that time, the government would have been willing maybe to accept, we will do this. But at the end of the day, nobody had the common sense, let me put it that way, of saying, we've made our point, but we can narrow it down to taking away something. Okay, so we dissolved SARS from the police. They've gotten a new name. So this police is the one that says, we have a court order telling us not to supervise an election in Edo. Our constitutional right is to protect lives and property. But on this Edo election, on this Rivers election, we are suspending our rights to protect the citizens. So what progress did we make with EndSARS? Because the point is, we need security of life and properties. So I'm of the view that, in summary, that something just has to change for us to understand that great social changes may be activated by great leaders or by great movements, but it is the everyday action of making sure the right things are done that makes society make progress.
You know, I would have been shocked if politics did not enter this conversation. The question I asked him were moments where he was proud about, when change had occurred. And somehow, this conversation took another trajectory. So I went to drag it back to where I was asking that question initially. Angela, it's going to be for you. So, for you, have there been examples of places where you have been proud of change? Or places where you have said, if we did not take this action, we would not have been able to record this much progress. Do you also want to share your experience on how that happened?
Interestingly, I think my response to this question will be more around localized change, so to speak. I think a lot of times we always assume that when we talk about change, it has to be always on a grand national level, but sometimes it really isn't. And I think a clear example really is even just, since you talked about blood earlier, so I'll talk about, so in a previous role, we are talking about maybe voluntary blood donation in the country, in Nigeria. And it's not exactly a conversation that a lot of people would want to have because blood in itself is not an appealing topic. But what I've found that as a result of consistently talking about this is that you have people who are even willing to now engage in the conversation. And this is completely where I agree with you, which is the fact that when you talk about, and I will answer your question, don't worry, you don't have to drag me back. But I just want to add a bit to the fact that when you talk about change, a lot of times what we have in Nigeria is, imagine you're trying to break down this wall for whatever reason, and you have maybe just this tiny hammer, and you're just consistently chipping at it at one end, as against multiple people chipping at it from different, it's going to take way longer. And that's, I think, a semblance of what we have in Nigeria. So you have different groups of people doing their own thing in different silos. So now, bringing it back to a moment in which I have been proud about the change is around this conversation of voluntary blood donation. You have more people that are now engaged and willing to talk about it because you've had situations where people believe that they have to sell their blood. So that's one example. Another quick example is, I know it's mentioned in the book, but I was on the streets for around the Abuja raids conversation, and it was really inspiring because I remember being there to cover the event as a journalist at the time and seeing how people were united irrespective of ethnicity, of gender, of age, or even the moral compass that certain people had, because it had such a diverse group. I think that's another example, even if it was not mentioned in the book, it's one I would mention anytime, any day, because in that moment I was so proud to be Nigerian. Then the third example I'll also share is maybe when you talk about when Nigeria has a common enemy, in that moment you are proud to be Nigerian. And let me give an example. When it's
right now we have one.
Yes, we do have
Libya.
one in Libya. Like right now, it's in that moment I'm like, yes, it feels so good to be Nigerian because we have a way of not beating one another in public, so to speak. And you come back home, even if you're in the wrong, let's fight the other person first. So in those moments, I'm of course definitely proud to be Nigerian.
Mobe, I will say that I'm veered away partly from talking about the proud moment is because I'm part of that moment when I'm proud, but I will go ahead and just say that. And that's when I took over the Federal Road Safety Commission. It was a moribund organization. It took us 3 months to get monthly reports. That's not quarterly report, monthly. It took 3 months to get a monthly report. And so we were more or less undertakers, announcing the people that had died without being able to do anything about it. But I was so proud being a Nigerian when the World Bank and Prince Michael of Kent came out and said, if there is anything the world needs to learn about road safety, it is from Nigeria. And FRSC Nigeria is an example to follow. And they didn't stop at that. They put $10 million behind that and said they want to show how a good organization, an organization that has transformed from a place where people just gather to enforce rules to becoming the major data hub of Nigeria and road crashes in Africa. So they appointed us to help Uganda, to help Sierra Leone, I had a staff in Sierra Leone for almost 1 year, helping Sierra Leone set up. And we didn't stop at that. We became ISO 9001 certified, which was something they said no paramilitary agency in the world has done, but we did it. And after doing it, and after getting that $10 million from FRSC, I had to leave when I became minister. They were planning to do an investment, but guess what happened? As I got to aviation, the World Bank came back and said, for you getting to aviation, we have $10 million again back on the table for improving aviation security, because we trust you, because we believe we can do it. And they didn't say that in private. They said it in a meeting in London where the global aviation network had come together for a meeting. President Jonathan was there. And they said to him, because of OSITA, we are going to invest in aviation security. So why I say this is that the people who did this were ordinary, everyday Nigerians who were going to work every day and were happy where they were. But now, they were now examples to the world that they were going to other countries and leading them. My staff in Freetown was the head of the agency for the 2 years he was there. He was the head of that agency. And I think that is something that gives me hope that, getting the template right, Nigeria can fly his flag very high in Africa.
Indeed, thank you so much for sharing that. Such a shame that former British Prime Minister didn't see that part when he said we were fantastically corrupt. But yeah, I mean, was the Prime Minister? Yes, who said that? But yeah, let's move to politics now, which is a terrain you're very familiar with. And I think all Nigerians are very familiar with their politics. Chinua Achebe said in 1983, I think in his book, The Problem About Nigeria, is that we like to talk about our country like the British talk about the weather. And that's what he said. I think it was the Vice President who said something about 1 step forward and 2 steps backward. And that's one area where it will seem that, we have taken 1 step forward and 2 steps, many steps as a matter of fact backward. You referenced the 2015 elections, which a lot of people, for different reasons, will tell you that many people take different lessons away from there. But they thought it was a place where we all could be proud of our country. The party that took over was happy. The party that lost did not lose complete glory in all. Something that is said was totally un-Nigerian. Another president conceding the victory to the one who won happened. It was actually a moment that made me cry. That moment made me cry as a Nigerian. I was immensely proud to be a Nigerian at that moment. But when you come from there to where we are now, where the results we see on IREV, or we don't even see the results, and we are just where we are not proud. We cannot even uphold the integrity of the elections which we conduct. How does one maintain hope for change? Because you say you are very hopeful, and I need you to share a bit of that. What exactly is informing your hope, your hopefulness, and your optimism, despite all that you have discovered with our elections?
All the same, because I don't even know that if the elections are free and fair and our result is uploaded, that the winner will be the person who is the most sensible amongst the lot. I'm not even certain that will happen. That is because until now, and I used to think it was a Nigerian problem, US has the same problem. And I saw that in East, people elected people that we thought were mentally deranged, who operated on the society, now became prime ministers and presidents. He then said something about elections. Elections are about emotions. It's not usually about logic. It's about how you make people feel, how they feel that you protect their interests or defend what they stand for. So once there is a we versus them, they tend to want that person who protects the us or the now. So talk about elections and his election management. What the Vice President told us now about Lagos State Judiciary. Because I keep wondering, every time he has studied in law school is about Lagos State. Lagos State laws, Lagos State tenancy laws, Lagos State civil procedure rules. Everything is about Lagos State. And Lagos State has shown steps ahead. Which is why, when this government was coming, and I said, well, worst case will be like Lagos, we will make progress. I'm a little confused whether these are the Lagos people who did it or there were other people involved. But that said, that said, I am of the view that our election management system needs immediate rethink. It's not about rewriting the electoral law. It's about unbundling INEC. Stopping this INEC as is, who is both the regulator and they are the implementers of the electoral rules and they are the regulators. So we need to unbundle INEC. And not just unbundling INEC, as committed, we need to go back to where President Yar'Adua left. God bless his soul. He won the election and came out and said, the election that brought me to power was flawed. That sentence in that speech was debated for more than 4 days. If you read Obasanjo's book, you could see where he said, I sent Osita Chidoka to see Yar'Adua. I went back and forth between explaining to him why he can't do that in this speech. And that my last card at him was that if you say this, they will use it against you in the courts. He said he has sought legal opinion, that nothing he says here matters to what was averred in the courts. And Obasanjo, in his usual said, he told 10,000, 50,000 megawatts was not possible. We should do the 10,000. Yar'Adua said, no, he wants to do 50,000. So when I came back, I said, did you tell him? I said, yes, I told him. So what did he say? I said, well, I think you need to talk again. Because I didn't quite understand what he's saying, but something to the effect that this is already written. He said, you're stupid. I said, yes, sir. Are you sure you explained to him well what I told you to explain? I said, yes, sir, I did explain. And it is interesting because President Yar'Adua said to me, listen, Mr. Sita, he calls me Mr. Sita, listen, I'm not going to be party to this. I have a name, a family, and I am not going to be party to this. So we must change this. So when he set up the Justice Uwais Commission, they finished their work, and part of the things they recommended is that the president will appoint the INEC chairman. It's part of the recommendations. They had other very deep recommendations, including the fact of both the appointment of the offenses tribunal for electoral offenses and all of that. So there is no reinventing the wheel. We need to just go back to these ways. Unfortunately, Yar'Adua said, I have a first. I don't know really now, have name, a family, but that was Yar'Adua's view. He said, look, I have a name and a family to protect. So I think that we should not leave it for our leaders to decide. We should fight narrow corridor. We should push for that change. We should push continuously, that not in rewriting rules, just rewriting the INEC rules, but that certain institutional safeguards be put into our election management system. And if it doesn't change, I'll tell you, if it doesn't change, the election of 2027 election, people may not bother contesting. It will be useless to contest the election if you go by what done and police in the last 2 elections. If you go by it and you contest the 2027 election, then you are mentally sick. Unless that the public and Nigerians are willing to restore order to our election management system. So for me, I think that where we are, and President Jonathan made that phone call, and I keep it was his decision that he will hand over if he lost. God's again being a presence at that event. When he told me we had lost the election, I said, how do you mean? They haven't announced the other states. There's still some states. He said, no, he had information. The election said, and sentenced to me. And he said, draft a speech for me, accept it. So on that speech I wrote, I have just spoken to the president-elect, Buhari. So when I brought it, it caused mayhem. Some of the people who are senior members of Tinubu's government today who joined Buhari said to Jonathan, don't do it. Don't do Buhari. Don't ever. We will not agree. We will destroy the, what do you call that place? ICC. We will do this. Accept it. The result, stop the announcement of the result. I said, Mr. President, these people will not go with you to ICC. They are just saying the one office, they will join the next government. As if I knew. And when I write my own memoirs, I will mention one by one. Do not accept. But he decided to accept. But the tragedy of our society is that Nigerians are now looking at people who do the right thing as stupid people. As that he is stupid. You committed treason by allowing him to make that call. By encouraging him to make that call, that was treason. I've had this nonsense. So the idea that doing the right thing makes you, the idea that we seated in this hall blowing grammar are the people who, they don't know what they are talking about. They're just blowing grammar. That is the danger in Nigeria. Why some of us now don't want to be seen as blowing grammar. We don't want to be seen as doing the right thing. We want to be seen and who will say, even if you're, what does it mean? We will be able to elect anybody we want. It's not enough to be governor. If you are doing it, you don't have integrity. That's the problem. It's integrity that's the problem. So all that is what Nigerians now praise as a strong man. And I don't think another Jonathan will agree to be a Jonathan who is a weak man. Thank you.
I can tell you that moment, I don't know what's with me and songs. I usually come up with a song for every moment makes me feel emotional. I don't know if it happens to you too. Does it happen to you too? For that particular moment when I heard the speech from President Jonathan, I was sleeping. As a journalist, I slept in front of the TV, and I remember running to the bathroom, and I was crying hot tears. And I know the song that came to my mind was Lucky Dube's song, If I'm Dreaming. I couldn't believe it. So regardless of what anyone says, I think that we should always uphold that moment as one where we all can be truly, because people didn't know that it could happen in this country. So you're concluding now, your own concluding thoughts. I'm going to have a question for the audience. It can be a rhetorical question. It can be one that we can in from Mr. Ige's. So going to round off nicely our generational discourse. But let me ask you very quickly. When you think about collaborating for change, because you've made reference to that wall where when people from it, from every side, the wall goes down faster. From your own conceptualization, where we are as a country, would you say that we all have the same idea about what wall needs to come down?
Oh no, absolutely not.
Absolutely
no,
not.
I don't think we do. Sense of it, we are still even trying to figure out what it means to be Nigerian. I think in one sense of it, we figured out our nationhood because we are like different nations within a nation. So, but we've not come to that sense of identity as a country. So it's like coming and then everybody's speaking slightly different languages. It makes it difficult to move forward. So I think first and foremost, I think we need to be able to tackle the question of what exactly it means to be Nigerian. And outside of Afrobeats and everything else that we celebrate right now, what is it? That's one question. Another thing that is important is to also understand what we want to tackle right now, this moment in history. And we won't be able to move forward. And the third thing is also to figure out how we want to articulate the message around it. And I will wrap up with this very quick anecdote. Listening to a panel recently, and there was on women in leadership, and there had older women, And it was also intergenerational about her experience in public service. There were moments that she wanted to, for lack of a better word, castigate government for one issue or the other. But because her husband service, he said, "You're not going to do that with my name attached to yours." So, she said, "Oh, fine, it's just the name. What's the name?" She decided to drop his last name and go ahead with the issues she wanted to advocate for, the issues she wanted to launch. She said that, and there was a word she used, and she said, "Oh, you have to be flexible. You have to be willing to accommodate, the man and all of that as a woman." And I remember that as I was listening to that, a lady in the audience, when it was time for audience engagement, much younger, 20s, early 20s, who said, feminist ideology, that would I have to shrink for another man's? You can imagine how there was applause in the already just erupted all over, and I was like, go for it. And in that moment, I was like, I see where the older woman is coming from. I also see where this other person was coming from. And somebody else, God bless her, got up on the audience and gave this response. She said, I think it's a matter of reframing the conversation. So in as much wisdom in being malleable and knowing when to maybe soft pedal a bit or just happening before you proceed, it's also important to allow yourself to be like a reed in wind that just goes wherever the wind takes you. You have to be able to stand for yourself as well. So there's a place for balance, right? I think as a country, that unique moment, that place of balance is where we need to also come to. To do that, we have to admit that as being assertive doesn't necessarily mean you cannot be malleable. Being flexible doesn't mean you cannot be, what's the word now? Firm, principle, exactly, thank you. It's a unique dynamic we need to come to, I think, as a country. And I think when we come to these three things, move forward.
Thank you so much. So as we wrap up now, and they've taken their concluding thoughts, I'm just going to take our audience, Deji said something when he was given his second poem. He said, "For the wisdom of elders, look not to Twitter." Did you hear that? Is this something you will agree with when you look at? Hello? Any thoughts on that? Because there's anybody I know is very vociferous on Twitter, he is. And I will consider him an elder in this instance. I think that it will be contextual, within context. But distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for my panel.
I think that's to the credit of the Vice President. I think he talked about his work in Lagos. And it's true that a lot of the work, and I think that Mr. Osita has also affirmed that the work that he has done in Lagos has really become a national project. I think that in some ways, at some point, Lagos was what we call the bellwether state in the American context, where when you start something somewhere, then it becomes a national project, whether in terms of the reforms that have happened, in terms of the administration of the criminal justice system, which is the one that probably have been very much more involved in. Now we have all the 36 states have done this one. It started in Lagos. The BAP law that started in Lagos have become a national project. The whole idea of arbitration as a system of justice also started in Lagos. That's becoming. So I think that there was a point in which that really Lagos was a real bellwether state, where everything that started in Lagos at that time became a national project eventually. So let's once again recognize him for all the work that he has done, and what he will do as well. And the reality, yes, like Osita, I was also hoping that Lagos would be the model, and maybe we have 2 more years to go. So maybe Lagos will also be model of what we have seen. So let's give hope a chance. Well, how is the unveiling done? Okay. Otherwise, I've invited the Vice President to join here. Of course, Otivik Buzo, the author. The generational conversation also, so come and join us as well. I think we have to come.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, we will see Dr. Kole Shetima unveil the book.
To the glory of God and to the service of humanity and the benefit of humanity, I want to cut this book and hope that it is going to be of help and useful to all of us in our society. Sorry, man. Thank you. Hey. So we now.
Congratulations to the author, UDO JUDE ILO, Invincible.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, I think the senior brother, the brother has to come. Sorry for the overlook. Now, can you come in also, please? You have a copy? Give me a copy. Okay. Okay, thank you very much for coming. And please try and get a copy before you leave. I remember the Vice President, I think at some point, he didn't want to disclose his own donation in one of the ceremonies. So I'm sure it's the same kind of situation that we have now. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. We are almost out of time, but in this short space of time, we would love to hear from a few people. First of all, the author, and then the vote of thanks. Please do not be in a hurry to leave. There are just 2 items that we'll do quickly. And even though you're not seeing me, I promise you that in the next 10 minutes, we will be out of this hall. Do his professional roles and writings. Now, many of you may not know that this young man is also a legal practitioner. How much he has practiced, we don't know. He'll tell us about that. But please join me to welcome the author, UDO JUDE ILO, for a short word.
Thank you. First, I want to apologize. Our intention was to get you out of this room by 7:30. But in the village where I come from, they say that when you're sleeping and the sleep is good, you keep doing it. So the sleep was good. We got carried away. We started snoring. But I thank you so much for staying all the way. A lot of our friends had to leave, understandably so, because they have stuff to take care of. We had to skip the section about of the interview with myself and Maugbe, just out of respect for your time. But I just want to say two things. One is I'm incredibly grateful to all of you who made our time to be here. Every birthday, I always have one message or the other. And I remember 2 years ago, my message on my birthday was the incredible opportunity to be loved and appreciated and supported by people, strangers, people I don't even know. And if this day has taught me anything, is again that affirmation that I'm a child of grace, that I've got the best set of friends, that I've got an amazing network, I've got people who bat for me even when I'm not in the room. I must thank especially Your Excellency, the Vice, your friendship over the years. Picking your phone, calling, checking in and all of that, and planning your schedule to be here this evening. And a whole lot of you here, Tony, you know, I mean, so many of you. And also, there's somebody in this room who had to travel just to attend this event first time today. And I want to ask you to please stand up. Please. Please. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Some friends came in from Lagos, but there are people I know before, so I'm not going to come. Yeah. So, but thank you. This book was a frustration. Yeah. Myself, if this 20 sector was actually worth it. And at the end of that debate, I think optimism won the debates over despondency. And if life has taught me anything, it's simply that when you keep going at it, it will always happen. I come from a very humble beginning. My father was a teacher. And I just need to mention, my eldest brother is here, Vin Martin Obiorilo, who is now the official grandpa in our family. But all through those years, I could see the power of consistency, even in the family circle. The ability to achieve the impossible because you're at it. You have hope, you're doing it, you're giving your best. If it happens for my family, it can happen for my community. If it happens for my community, it can happen for my state. It can happen for my country. It can happen for the world. Optimism is not a naive idea about, you know, a perfect world. It's that understanding that something can be different, one way or the other, and our ability to stay on it to make sure that the difference is actually the difference that we want. And so the message of this book is simple. These are indeed hard times. These are terrible times. These are horrible times, if I may use the word. But despondency is not the answer. If you give up, you die. But if you keep trying, even if it doesn't happen for you, your little effort will make it easier for the generations yet to come. And so let us go with determination that we'll never give up. And just like my father told me 39 years ago, I was finding it difficult to carry out a chore, and I said to my mom, I can't do it. He said to me, never ever say you can't. Always say try. And to all of you here today, keep trying. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. UDO JUDE ILO. Ladies and gentlemen, please permit me to bring on someone to tell us a final thank you, who came all the way from Mali. He is currently the International Foundation for Electoral Systems Country Director for Mali. He has more than 20 years of experience promoting elections and good governance in West Africa, including vast experience in electoral processes as a program implementer, researcher, observer, thought leader, and educator.
Especially since he has said thanks to everybody here, so I'm happy to be here because I want to say thank you to Jude, to us. What, in my view, democracy is about. Learning by doing. So we need to be going back to what we have done, learn to identify progresses that we are making things better. So really thank you, Jude, by recalling us what I think democracy is about. I just also want to say thank to all of you, starting with Mr. Vice President, for taking your time, coming to support Jude in helping us to continue to keep hope. The challenge that Nigeria and our countries in Africa are facing today, we can, if we keep trying, we will make it. By the Vice President rightly said, this is just the beginning. This is the first step. This is the first of a series that will come. But this will be base for the development tools that will be accompany these third sector actors in contributing to the consolidation of democracy in Nigeria and Africa. So once again, thanks to you, and good luck, Jude.
Thank you very much, Mr. Monfort, and thank you everyone who took out time from their busy schedule to join us for this unveiling of this remarkable book. Just know this, it is possible if we all decide to be intentional and positively walk towards that change we all desire. God bless you all and have a fantastic night and the rest of the week and indeed the rest of the year. Bye-bye.
We are that talented generation. We
Nation.